Our next panel, coming right off of this conversation, while we were talking about strategic risk in this panel, you would realize that we also referenced a lot of technology. There's a lot of interweaving of the technology and innovation development, because technology is a key innovator at all times of our strategies, the goals that we want to set, the way we manipulate the environment that we're in order to achieve those goals, and the way we leverage the tools that we have, which in our case right now, the technological infrastructure that we have is a significant part of the toolbox for achieving our strategies. So very fittingly, our next panel is going to explore some more of those technology and innovation issues and speak to the particular risks that arise in that area, as how we can use the opportunities that are presented. I think Ricardo mentioned that technology is now leveling the playing field. So how are we going to use the technology to get ourselves further ahead of the game? Before we start the panel, we have a presentation from Ms. Sana Ragbir, who is the Group Chief Risk Officer at First Citizens. She is a former General Manager of First Citizens Investments and has over 17 years of experience in investment banking, including 3 years internationally. From that background, is well acquainted with international and regional markets and securities. She's currently a board member of the Trinidad and Tobago Manufacturers Association and was a former board member at AmCham. So we want to welcome Sana and listen to what she wants to say and how she introduces the concept of risk and in technology and how that impacts us right now and how we can leverage the opportunities. So thank you very much for joining us, Sana. It's a real pleasure to have you with us. So please, Sana, I would like to ask you to take the floor.
Sure. Thank you very much, Natasha. Good afternoon, everyone. It is my pleasure to be part of this conference this year, the Caribbean Risk Management Conference. And of course, very excited to be part of a very esteemed panel of experts and to talk about a very timely and pertinent topic, technology. How can we enable technology, use technology and digital transformation? Now, before COVID, of course, with the fourth industrial revolution was well on its way and progressing. But with COVID, we're seeing where it's almost on steroids. So now we have digital 4.0 on steroids, and it is now top priority for governments, for companies, for individuals. How can we all digitally transform ourselves? However, as we embark on this journey, it needs to be clear, we all need to be clear that we understand all of the risks that are associated with technology and enabling technology. So my role, as Natasha said, very quickly, I'm going to just introduce some of the key risks associated with technology, and then I'll hand over to my fellow panelists, where we will engage in some active discussions and debates on how we confront these risks, and more importantly, what are some of the practical solutions that we can use to manage those risks. So first of all, I mean, you've heard it throughout the conference today already, data privacy. It's a hot, live topic right now, data privacy. And it's very important that as we enable technology and as you conduct or implement digital transformation, you need to be aware of the data privacy laws in the respective regions you operate in. And I say it's a hot topic because if you look at what's happening with TikTok and the US government right now. So the US government right now, TikTok is supposed to be banned in the US. However, they received a 2-week extension last week. Now, why would the US government ban TikTok? So it's really about concerns about what is TikTok using the data, all the data that they're gathering from the technology they have. How are they using that data? And more importantly, from the US government's perspective, given that TikTok, their parent company is a company in China, They have concerns about whether US consumers, all that data is going into the hands of the Chinese government. So those questions are still unanswered, but again, it highlights the importance of having a clear data privacy program in place and understanding the laws and regulations in the countries and territories you operate in how you use data. Now, the flip side to that as well, there are risks and concerns about utilizing data. There are also many benefits. When you deploy technology, you have all of these data analytics. You can do data mining, utilize data science. It's a whole new field that is developing. And when you utilize those data, you can actually create benefits that redounds to your customers to create a better customer experience for them. So there are always two sides to it of how you use the data. But again, we can discuss more in the panel, the pros and cons of all this data that we get from deploying technology. The second risk, of course, information security risk, data security risk. And I do want to talk about the difference between data privacy and data security before I move on to talk more about information security risk. So data security is really about your responsibility to protect your customers' data from unauthorized access by third parties. Data privacy issues, however, are all about how you use your customers' data. Do you have their consent, etc.? So that's where the difference comes in. Now, of course, with information security, we've had malware, ransomware in existence before COVID. Of course, COVID has now created a situation where it is on the rise. It has come to the shores of the Caribbean. It is in all of our respective countries. We hear of incidences happening of ransomware. So it is something that is very concerning for all of us. And as you deploy technology, it is critical that you develop a clear cybersecurity strategy and framework around your digital transformation efforts. And as part of that clear cybersecurity strategy, you need to also ensure that you define clearly your risk appetite for cybersecurity risk. Because, and I'm going to throw it out there, it is impossible to eliminate 100% of cybersecurity risk. You will always be exposed to those cybersecurity threats. So you need in your organization to develop a clear risk appetite of how much you're willing to tolerate in terms of cybersecurity threats. So as an example, if we look at Facebook, every year Facebook budgets hundreds of millions of US dollars just for data breaches, data leaks, cyber threats. So they have a risk appetite. And why is that? It's because data is their core business model. So they know that they have to tolerate some level of fines, penalties, cyber threats. So in developing your cybersecurity strategy, be sure that you also address how much is your organization willing to tolerate when it comes to cybersecurity threats. A third and important risk is, of course, regulation and compliance risk. So as you deploy technology, you need to, again, and I mentioned it earlier, you need to be very clear that you develop a regulatory and compliance framework around how you use the technology, what's going to be the processes that's governing the use of the technology. I like to always refer to the GDPR in Europe. It's really data protection laws that are held up as the gold standard globally. When we talk about GDPR, and many countries around the world are following suit from Europe to actually implement similar laws in their countries. Right here in the Caribbean, we have a few data protection acts throughout the Caribbean. Some are very up to date, some are lagging, some are partially enacted, but nevertheless they exist. So therefore you have to be sure that you understand all the laws and regulations when it comes to technology. Fintechs are on the rise, but when you work with fintechs, be sure that you understand how to conduct that due diligence. How do you onboard fintechs? Who are the tech companies you're going to work with? Do you understand their policies, their procedures, etc.? Does it fit well with your company? E-money, another big trend that is coming to the Caribbean as well, and you see it in various governments are tackling e-money, and central banks have this as a top agenda item. So when you talk about e-money is going to lead to more e-commerce activity. So even as a firm, regardless of your industry, once you're employing e-commerce, you need to understand with e-money, what are the KYC AML laws that you have to abide by? What does your financial institution expect of you if you're going to be using e-money, etc.? So all those are the things to keep in mind when I talk about regulations and compliance. Operational risk, of course. I mentioned information security, but there's also operational risk and controls to consider when you deploy new technologies and you implement digital transformation. Would the traditional risk management frameworks, would they really work in an environment where technology is being deployed in digital transformation? When you think of an agile environment and you think of a team that is utilizing agile methods, Scrum methodology, sprints, all of those fancy words that are now taking mainstream, and more we as organizations have to understand those new ways of working. And when you think of that and you think of traditional risk metrics, traditional risk frameworks, are those traditional methods going to work in an agile environment? My view is that it will not, but at the same time, there still needs to be something, some type of framework or governance or overarching principle that could govern agile methods and an agile workforce, but you don't stifle it at the same time. So how are we going to tackle that? What's the mix? What's the right combination of risk metrics, KPIs, KRIs, etc., that can be set that can help govern all of these new agile processes that will come about from digital transformation? And finally, I mean, a very big risk that we all have to take on once you implement digital transformation efforts, and I'm sure many of you in the audience have seen this already, the shortage of skill sets and the talent needed to implement digital transformation. It's an entirely new field, and I mentioned some of it already. It takes a whole new way of working. It's a culture shift to become agile. Those skill sets are short, especially in the Caribbean. And we need to ask ourselves, not only how do we reform the university, the education sector to build those skill sets in the young people that are coming up, but how, when you look at the existing workforce, how do we equip our existing workforce with those skills needed so that we can all work in that new future that is coming? So at this point, I think I've spoken very briefly because I want to leave most of the discussion to the panelists at this point. So I want to hand back over to Natasha, and I look forward to a very active and lively discussion.
Thank you very much, Sana. Fantastic. I think you have, in a short period of time, covered the widest scope and depth of the technology issues and risk management in the technology space. Particularly, I mean, very keenly, things like data privacy. The reality is many people do not even realize that there is the concept of data privacy and that data is actually extraordinarily valuable. So when they share information, they don't realize that that information could be utilized. So I think that's one of the gaps that we have in our country and our region, that appreciation for the value. And even on the side of the companies that gather the data, the understanding of the value of their customer data and how it could be utilized and leveraged, including the risks inherent in doing so. So that was a phenomenal introduction of the topic. Thank you very much.